everyone, it's Sevi and welcome to class where we're going to talk about Dehya. Now, I made my initial Dehya guide where I did give some of my thoughts on how she performs, but in this video, we're going to go a bit deeper. We are going to break down the flaws of Dehya's kit. We all know that she has issues, and again, I did go through some of them, but here I want to particularly focus on some of her main problem areas, and then as we go along, think about proposing potential alternatives or potential fixes to what could have made Dehya's kit a better version of what it currently is. I guess in a thought experiment type thing, reimagine what she could be. So a few disclaimers before we get into it. This is not a guide. Second, this is not aimless bashing. If you're new to my content, I don't like bashing characters. I generally don't. I'm usually very optimistic about characters. So if I do have negative things to say about a character, I always make sure they are backed up with evidence, that it's not unreasonable and that it's not excessive. I really like Dehya as a character, and we're gonna keep it with that in mind. I don't work for Hoyoverse. I am doing this because I want to give my take, present some opinions, present some ideas, and then maybe even like open up discussions, whether in the comments section or anyone who watches this video if it brings out ideas for you. Next is that I might miss some things. I will be going over her main problem areas. That being said, there are certain things I will focus on and some things that I might brush over. Next, there may be better ideas out there, such as yours. Like, I might point out this problem of potential fix, but maybe your idea would have a bit more cohesiveness or a bit more logic. Feel free to comment your ideas as we go along. This is an open discussion. This is a classroom. Class is in session, and we're doing it the old school way with some PowerPoints and like your online class teacher right here. All right, so all that being said, let's dive into the video. So like I said, Dehya has several issues. I'm sure most, if not all of us, are already aware of this at this point. One main issue is that Dehya's role feels unclear. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, there are players who claim and feel that Dehya was built to be a defensive support, you know, a tank, a damage sponge of sorts. Although when you take a deeper look, which we will be doing, we'll realize that, well, she's not defensive enough, and her defensive support utilities have a bunch of flaws to them that make it feel insufficient. And honestly, the same can be said about Dehya's offensive support. We all have some idea already about her damage output, and basically, she is underwhelming in both defense and offense. Where does that leave us? Well, it feels like her role is unclear, and more than that, it feels like her kit is unfinished. In fact, when you look at her C0 kit, and then you look at her constellations, it kind of hits you like, her constellations seem to implement things that I would have wanted to see in the base kit. I think her C1 to C5 kit should have been her base kit. Throughout this video, I might be pointing out some areas where I think her constellations should have fit into her base kit, but yeah, that's my general sentiment. Dehya. I thought I was done feeling things about Dehya's kit when I posted the guide, but no. Okay, we are back in the bargaining stage. Anyway, so the first part of Dehya's kit that I want to tackle are her defensive capabilities. I do think that there was some merit to trying to turn Dehya into a new form of defense. So if we look at the current forms of defense that we already have, the closest comparison would probably be that of a shielder. And we already have several good shielders. Like, shielder characters, they are valuable, they are solid, we have good shielders among our roster, and we even have a shielder Archon, Zhongli. Now, what are shields trying to accomplish? First of all, they offer interruption resistance, and second, they negate damage, or in another sense, they take damage for you so that your active character doesn't take damage as long as the shield is active. Now, let's compare that to what Dehya is trying to offer. So shields offer interruption resistance. Dehya also offers interruption resistance. Shielders negate damage, or rather shields negate damage and take damage for you, and that's what Dehya also tries to do. When she redirects damage towards herself, she takes that damage for the active character. She doesn't redirect all of it, but she redirects around half of it. What else do shields do? Well, shields follow you around. Compare that to Dehya, it becomes circle impact. However, shields can break. And this is one key thing. I think that Dehya's form of defense is like trying to improve or trying to at least give an alternative to, right? Instead of a shield that can break because it's taking too much damage, what Dehya offers is something that can't break. Her field can't break. It's going to be there for the entire duration that it's intended to. But given these, does Dehya suffice? Does she fulfill what a shielder is trying to do? If we take a closer look at it, well, then that's when the problems start to appear. Let's talk about the key things that Dehya's defensive utility tries to offer, starting with her interruption resistance. So what does it actually do as of now? Golden Forged Form, which is basically her highest level of interruption resistance, it gives infinite poise. And infinite poise is extremely valuable because it basically means you don't get interrupted. Like Magu Kenki could be attempting to slice you in half, and your Ganyu is still going to charge her shot. You know, as long as she's still alive, as long as she still has HP left, she's going to be unbothered. And it's actually pretty impressive when it's active because your character, it really doesn't get interrupted. However, when you look at the mechanics of this state of infinite poise, let's start with the timing of her Golden Forged Form. First of all, Dehya's Golden Forged Form only lasts 9 seconds from her skill cast. For reference, her skill field lasts 12 seconds. So if we compare that, there is an awkward 3-second difference where Dehya does offer some interruption resistance, but since it's not the full thing, it still kind of feels like you're being cut short. Like, it still feels insufficient because that Golden Forged Form doesn't last the entirety of her skill. And then if we get more technical about it, the duration of the Golden Forged Form isn't even tied to the presence of the field. The Golden Forged Form's timer starts upon the field cast. But remember that Dehya's burst can actually interrupt the field. Now imagine this. You take Dehya, you put down her skill, and she activates her Golden Forged Form, and she activates her skill field, and then some seconds later, she comes on field, does her burst. When she finishes it, she puts back the field. At that point, the Golden Forged Form would pretty much have expired. Like, an easy fix that I would propose, honestly, is to just make that Golden Forged Form last with the field. If the field is there, the infinite poise is there. It's not on a separate timer. It's just part of the field buffs. Another thing is that I would take Dehya's C2 and build it into her base kit. And for reference, I'm specifically talking about how her recast extends the duration of the skill field. Right now, her recast mainly repositions the field, but it doesn't extend the duration and it doesn't refresh the duration either. So I think it would be really good if she were actually able to extend the duration of that field. The next major part of Dehya's defensive capabilities is her damage mitigation. And when I say mitigation, I mean mitigation that is in reality just redirection. So what it does is that it redirects damage to Dehya. When the active character takes damage from an enemy, instead of taking the whole lot, it takes half of it and then redirects it to Dehya. So Dehya takes that damage over a duration of time. And then Dehya counteracts the damage that is redirected to her by using self-healing. But when Dehya gets damage redirected to her, it does not inherently get reduced unless she procs the passive. So when Dehya recasts her skill or does her burst, she procs the passive that reduces the damage she takes, or the damage that's redirected to her, by 60%. And that passive lasts 6 seconds. It's there, but the thing is, like, it needs extra steps to get to, and it doesn't last for very long. So in all honesty, like, it's kind of difficult to feel, and it's in yet another awkward spot of timing where extra steps, weird duration doesn't match up, and it could have been simpler and smoother. The other thing is that Dehya does not heal anyone else. And I'm not saying that Dehya should be a team healer. I'm not saying she should be a healer. I'm just saying that because Dehya does not heal anyone else, and she's only taking like half of the active character's damage, you still end up very much needing a healer on your team. It doesn't feel sufficient. She's not healing anyone else, but the rest of the team is still taking a considerable amount of damage. And then Dehya's own self-healing does have downtime, and you may have experienced this, or it may not be a problem for you, but she can very much die off field. Some pretty simple fixes. First of all, that her skill redirects more damage to herself. Right now we're sitting at 50%. If that goes up to 70, 75, or even 90%, I think that would be a vast improvement and would actually mitigate the need for a healer. And another fix I would give is just that it reduces damage for Dehya all throughout. You know, don't make it extra steps. Don't make it this small separate timer window of 6 seconds. Just if the field is there, let Dehya reduce the damage that she takes as well. And then there's this, which is better uptime on self-healing, whether this is through a shorter cooldown or a longer duration. I just think that if Dehya is actually taking more damage from the active character, like, she needs to be more self-sufficient, she will need improved self-healing as well. Okay, so does Dehya take the place of a shield? Is she as good as a shield? Like, in concept, she could be, but as she is now, with the current issues and awkward spots that it has, I would say not quite. So if her defense is mediocre, then that probably means she's made for offense, right? Like, she has to be good at something, right? That's what we're going to visit next. Now we will take a look at Dehya's offensive capabilities, and here we're going to tackle both her as a pyro damage dealer and her as a Burgeon trigger. First of all, let's take on her burst damage, and her burst is really emphasized as where she deals most of her damage. That's really all she does during her burst. She punches it out and then puts back the field if there's still a timer running, if there's still a duration left in it. But her burst is really meant for damage. And from the get-go, we can already identify some main problems, such as the multipliers are sad. It's one of the main things that players will notice is that she doesn't deal enough damage. Her damage is underwhelming. It really could have been better. And because of that, her multipliers are sad. She takes 4 seconds of field time to execute that damage. 4 seconds or more, actually. The damage payoff does not justify the duration. Basically, it takes too long for her to deal an amount of damage that just ends up being underwhelming. So what are some quick fixes for this? One is to simply improve her multipliers. In what direction or in what way would that be? This, I think, is where you can build C1 into her kit, which basically adds improved HP scaling. I would want Dehya to have more HP scaling damage because it just streamlines her build into HP, giving her more damage and giving her more tanking utility. As of now, yeah, she does have dual attack and HP scaling, but I would want her C1 to be built into her kit where it just gives more HP scaling. The alternative, and this is an idea that's been floated around a lot, and I particularly like it, is that Dehya deals more damage based on the damage she takes, or based on the damage that's redirected to her. And I personally think this would be a nice way to tie her kit together because it gives an incentive for her to take damage, which is that she deals it back out as more damage. And this could be a stacking mechanic, this could just be like an accumulation mechanic, or damage reflection, or damage countering, whatever you want to call it. Now, would I take both the C1 and this thing? For balancing purposes, I would say it's really more of an either or, unless they just really make her base multipliers very low so that she would need both of these. I would be fine with one or the other. Just improve her damage is the bottom line. Then there's this open-ended question, kind of. I would like to know your preference on it, is whether or not to keep the current duration of her burst. So right now her burst is set at 4 seconds. Personally, I feel like it's a bit too short. You know, if Dehya dealt the proportionate amount of damage to merit her field time, I feel like 4 seconds is a bit too short to enjoy her burst animation. In terms of DPS windows, the shortest we've had so far is Mr. Ayato with 6 seconds of skill field time. And then after that, we have Raiden with 7 seconds with her burst. So Dehya sitting at 4 seconds Maybe it's because I'm not used to it yet, because she's the first character who's done 4 seconds, but I feel like it could be longer. I wouldn't mind a 6-second burst from Dehya. And then the alternative is to just make it a one-hit nuke. There's like a range. It could be longer, it could be shorter. I think the bottom line is that the damage is enough to justify the duration. But yeah, I'm just throwing it out there. I wouldn't mind a longer burst duration. The burst gameplay. We tackled the damage issues, but I feel like the gameplay is a whole other thing, honestly. And a lot of it roots from the fact that it is automated movement. So the automated movement, this is the first time we've had a character that's had a state where the movement is automated and then you're just supposed to like speed it up, right? Just increase the attack speed and then that's all you're contributing to it. She does her own auto-targeting, and honestly, it's one of the things that makes it feel clunky as well. Because previous characters have been victim to Genshin's auto-targeting, it's not always reliable. We've seen this with Yoimiya, we've seen this with ranged characters. Like, auto-targeting can be janky. Honestly, I feel like just the automated movement might have introduced more problems than it was trying to solve. I think having some level of control over Dehya's burst would just greatly benefit it. And an adjacent problem is that jumping cancels Dehya's burst. There are a few ways to look at it, alright? I've seen some perspectives that say like, okay, it's okay that Dehya's jumping cancels her burst because, first of all, why would you jump during her burst? Well, you could get frozen, and the way to get out of frozen is to jump. You can also argue like, at least jumping is a way to end the burst prematurely and then give your other units field time. If you wanted to cancel the burst early and give your other teammates field time, like just swap. No other character with a special state has a toggle button. This jump canceling the state doesn't happen to Xiao. Obviously, it doesn't happen to Raiden, it doesn't happen to Ito. This is the first time we've ever seen it happen on a character. Restricting movement in that sense, I feel like, is again a problem that we didn't need to experience or even have. And if we're talking about burst toggles or a button to toggle a burst state, just let it be the burst button, you know? Just let it be the same button that actually casts the burst. And the very easy and straightforward fix to this entire thing is to just make Dehya's burst a stance change. Like, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. Just let it be a stance change that allows for manual movement that also allows us to jump during her burst, and I feel like that would solve a lot of problems. Now, one interaction in particular is that Dehya's burst currently doesn't work or doesn't proc Xingqiu and Yelan's burst. Naturally, this is something that is pretty bothersome. Because if you want a Pyro character to be a vaporized DPS, you pair them with Xingqiu. And the fact that you can't do this with Dehya to the full extent, it hurts her. It hurts her damage. It hurts her teams. Although I do want to propose a counter argument, and this could be like me coping, this could like be me as a devil's advocate. I hope that in the future, it means there is a Hydro character that will come along that is as good, if not better, of a Hydro enabler as Xingqiu and can work with Dehya, or works in perhaps more universal aspects as Xingqiu. Because from the beginning of Genshin time, Xingqiu has been glued to Pyro carries because he's simply that good. And I wouldn't put it past Hoyoverse to want to start creating a group of characters that doesn't rely on Xingqiu. Of course, it means that they're going to rely on a different Hydro character, and until that Hydro character comes out, this particular group of characters is going to feel terrible. But I think that down the line, especially since we are expanding characters constantly, maybe there is space for that. Maybe there is space for a Xingqiu adjacent, a Xingqiu alternative, you know, someone who will pair very, very well with Dehya and make her a good vaporized DPS. Again, I could be coping really hard, but yeah, honestly, if it's not meant to be, if Dehya isn't meant to synergize with Xingqiu, I really hope that there's a good reason for it. I really hope it's something that will be solved down the line. Let me know if I'm crazy or not crazy. Anyway, another particular comment I've been seeing is that Dehya's burst should cost less. I don't think that's a core issue. There are two main factors that kind of lead to this sentiment that I can see. First is that the damage doesn't pay off. It doesn't pay off in the duration, and it also doesn't pay off with the energy cost. Dehya's burst currently costs 70 energy, and for the damage it deals, right, it might as well only cost 40. And the second thing is that Dehya has really bad energy issues. This makes her burst cost feel even bigger than it really is, because Dehya just doesn't have a good way to get energy back. When Dehya does her burst, which is supposed to be her dedicated field time, she literally picks up her skill field and loses her means of generating particles. So she can't benefit from her own particles while she is doing her field time. The one thing that actually does regenerate energy for her is locked behind her C4. The fact that Dehya has poor damage during her burst, she also has energy issues, means that you have to relegate so many ER stats to her just for her to burst reliably. And of course, at that point, you would feel like her burst should just cost less. I think the alternative is simply, aside from making it deal more damage, just give her better energy mechanics. Build her C4 into her base kit. Just let her regenerate energy as she is punching. Let her get back some flat energy, and that would already be a massive help. Turn it into a new passive. An alternative is to give her some means of keeping the particle generation on. Whether that's keeping her skill field on or something else, just like let her take in her own pyro particles. Another interesting idea that I saw from Twitch chat is that Dehya receives some energy every time damage is redirected to her. And I think that's pretty interesting. It could be its own constellation. It could be an alternative passive that gives her more energy. The bottom line is to just let her get energy, whatever or however it is, and her burst will feel like it costs an appropriate amount of energy. Next, we will tackle Dehya's skill damage. Dehya's skill damage mainly suffers from also low multipliers. There is a sentiment that Dehya's main damage source should basically be Burgeon. And while she can proc Burgeons, I really don't think she was meant for that. And I also don't think she is great at that either, because her skill procs have a 2.5 second interval, and this does limit Burgeon potential. Okay, it's not a matter of that 2.5 seconds is good because it allows you to create more dendro cores before she explodes them all at once. Because if you didn't know, enemies have a limit of only taking 2 instances of dendro core damage every 0.5 seconds. If you explode all these dendro cores at once, and you don't have enough enemies to take all the damage instances that those deal, you are essentially wasting dendro core damage. You're essentially wasting Burgeons. Which is why Toma works so well, because he procs them often. He gets the Burgeon damage often, the frequency is there, the enemies will take it every second because he's proccing Burgeons every second. And yeah, Dehya's Burgeon capabilities are most definitely outclassed by a 4-star, by Toma. I really don't think she was made for Burgeon, and I don't think she's great at it, even if it's one way to play her. Some simple fixes that could go either way is 1, make her skill procs faster, even if it has low multipliers. Then that would make her a more reliable Burgeon trigger. Or 2, keep it as slow as it is and just make the multipliers higher. Just let each hit harder. You can't have a damage dealing thing that is both slow and weak. Okay, pick one. Just pick one. It cannot be both, or else it will just suck. So to recap where we have gotten thus far, Dehya's defensive abilities have flaws. Her offensive abilities also have flaws because they don't deal enough damage. And it's really unclear what she is supposed to excel at. And currently, or so far, we've been looking at fixing individual aspects of her kit, which is great because that's how we've been tackling it. We've been tackling each issue individually. But now I want to talk about introducing a cohesive kit, trying to not just look at the parts, but the whole, and see if we can come up with something that makes sense, that seems solid, that seems more finished than it does now. To guide us with that, though, I think we should first take into consideration the standards of standard characters. I'm sure a lot of us were hoping or wanted Dehya to be a limited character. I personally did. Like, I thought she was going to be a limited character. I really wanted her to be pretty special. But just for the sake of this discussion, I think I'm going to keep this parameter of her being a standard character, and so she should be standard character level. Now, what does that mean? It doesn't mean she should be bad. Okay, well, let's get that straight. Just because you're a standard character doesn't mean you're a bad character. Standard character kits are just relatively straightforward. Like, if we look at our damage dealers here, that's pretty much all they do. They deal damage. They don't really have any off-field presence. Tignari has off-field presence in the sense that his taunt skill can last even while he's off field. But really, he's just using it for himself because as a ranged character, he can benefit a lot from a taunt ability. And if we look at standard characters, like, they are sufficient in their role. They can get the job done and they're pretty good. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're the best at their role. Limited characters tend to be like the premium for that, but at the same time, standard characters should still at least be decent. Let's keep this in mind as we move along to the revised kit. The first revised kit I want to introduce is one that is damage oriented. First of all, this kit focuses on improving her DPS potential essentially, whether that's becoming a raw pyro damage dealer or becoming a Burgeon trigger. Could go both ways, both output damage. So starting with her skill, I would emphasize, or I would want, that aspect of accumulating extra damage based on damage taken. We mentioned this earlier. I'm bringing this into the revised kit now. I think it's cool. I think it would be a very nice unifying aspect of her kit that makes it, or that gives it a bit more purpose and a bit more sense. The next thing is that I would want her skill to deal coordinated damage every 1.5 seconds, even if it has low multipliers. And this, as you can tell, is really for Burgeon proccing. Some optional things that I would like to see, but could be left aside for balancing purposes, is that 1, her skill delivers the highest interruption resistance all throughout. It doesn't have like varying levels of interruption resistance, it just gives the highest from the get-go. Next is built-in damage reduction upon skill cast. Even if this is just for herself, even if it's not that much, I would prefer it to just be built into her skill and built into her field instead of it having the extra steps that it does currently. Moving on to her burst, this is my preference. Again, I would want her burst phase to last 6 seconds. So she gets 6 seconds of damage dealing time. She is punching, and I think that's a considerable amount to have her on field, enjoy her animations, and feel like she was really there, like her presence was really there. Just remove the automated targeting and hitting. Just let it be manual, just let it be a stance change, just let it be. That would give us more control. It could potentially solve the jump canceling her burst problem. It could solve a bunch of problems. Here, again, we get to see the passive that unleashes extra damage based on the damage taken. So this would be the thing that kind of strings her skill and her burst together. She accumulates damage taken during her skill. When she pops out her burst, she unleashes it all. And then let her burst regenerate flat energy and healing for herself with every punch landed, basically her C4. Like I said before, I would want her C4 to be built into her own base kit. It makes her more self-sufficient, it makes her energy more reliable. It lets her feel like she is meant to burst every rotation without much hassle. Now, I would personally prefer a damage-oriented Dehya. She is fierce. She's a lion. She looks like she's made to deal damage. Like, that is her role. We want to see her fierce, you know? We want to see her beat up bad guys because she's just that badass of a character. I think that is the most consistent thing with her character. But of course, for the sake of alternatives, for the sake of flexibility, I do want to entertain her being support-oriented. Dehya is a bodyguard. If she supports well, if her defense and tanking is effective, at least it still has some consistency with her character, and at least it still delivers some purpose better than it does currently. So with this second revised kit, support-oriented utilities. The big emphasis here is letting her skill be like very good support, essentially. This focuses on Dehya being a mostly off-field unit where a bunch of the support utilities are built into her skill, and then she's not that concerned about dealing damage or having a damage payoff so much. First thing, higher damage percent redirection. So basically, let her redirect more damage towards herself than she currently does. Again, right now she's at 50%. If that goes higher, upwards of 70%, I think that would be a good state to be in. Next, have the highest interruption resistance golden forged form all throughout. Again, I feel like there shouldn't be extra steps or weird timers to go with that. Next, build in the C2, which mainly emphasizes the skill duration extension. Let her skill have very, very good uptime. Better uptime than it does now, at least. And with that, build in the damage reduction for herself upon cast, even if it's not that much. Okay, so we're after both the redirection being built in and the damage reduction being built in. Let her tank all that damage, it's her job. Let her deal the coordinated attacks every 1.5 seconds, which can have low multipliers again. I think that this is something that I would keep even if Dehya is support oriented, because it's at least something that Thoma has, right? Like Thoma was built to be a shielder, or his kit is geared to be a shielder, but the convenience of his shield procs and the additional pyro procs that come with it, it makes him be a good Burgeon damage dealer. So I think that Dehya, even if she were to have a more support oriented kit, it would be a really nice touch if she still had more frequent coordinated attacks to be a Burgeon damage dealer. And then to further complement her damage, even if her damage isn't meant to be that much, still give her like the accumulated extra damage bonus based on damage taken. So it can be to a lesser degree than her damage-oriented kit. I still think it would be a nice thing to use to at least tie her damage sponging together with whatever damage she will deal. It doesn't have to be that great. Her multipliers don't have to be great, but I think it would still be a cool thing to have. And then going to her burst, if Dehya is meant to be mainly an off-field character, then I'd be okay with her burst just being a one-hit nuke. And using it is also optional. It could be a burst that she doesn't have to use every rotation. She could pop it once every 2 rotations, or just pop it when there's an emergency, when you need iframes or something. Or maybe when she's like maxed out the damage that she can accumulate, so that she has little to no ER concern, so that you don't even need to think about building ER on her. Just focus on building HP so she can tank, or building EM so she can Burgeon. And then again, just to tie the skill and burst together, there's a passive that interacts with her skill and interacts with her burst and tries to make her kit a bit more interesting, a bit more cohesive. Again, doesn't have to be to the same degree as the damage-oriented kit that I theorized earlier. And yeah, those were my main ideas for Dehya's revised kit. Again, I don't know if this will ever happen. I personally don't really see it ever happening, and we might just have to deal with the fact that it is as it is now. But as one of my Twitch viewers said yesterday, thinking about Dehya's revised kit is cathartic. Like, even if you can probably accept that it will never happen, it's cathartic to just like try to revise one in your head and then dream about what Dehya could have been. You know, what she could have been good at. So now I want to ask you, how would you reimagine Dehya's kit? Would it look like how I imagined it? Would it be something completely different? Would you tweak a few things? Let me know down in the comments. Again, we are in class. This is an open discussion. I want to hear your thoughts and your opinions. We are wrapping up. I'm almost done coping. I swear I'm almost done being in the bargaining phase. As we're wrapping up, I want to give special thanks to a few groups and individuals. First of all, thank you Twitch chat for giving me feedback on my presentation. I did work on this presentation live on Twitch. If you don't follow me yet on Twitch, or if you want to catch me streaming, I always have the link to my Twitch down in the description. It's Sevi_plays. Thank you also to my mod Valid for the extra memes. He gave me some extra memes to stick into this presentation, and I'm very grateful for it. Thank you Canva for this template. Canva, you're awesome. You're very convenient. You saved my student life. And then thank you to all the players, TCs, CCs, everyone who has like given takes on Dehya's issues, who's tested Dehya, who has discovered other issues and bugs and like gameplay interactions, that everyone who's like weighed in, tried to organize info, tried to organize the list of things that could be improved. I am very grateful for like all the public information you've provided. And last of all, I want to thank Dehya for existing. Without Dehya, we would not be here. One of the characters of all time. So with that being said, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't already, and I will see you all soon. Take care!